So I'm not looking my best, but I still put my camera on. So thank you, Micah. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Karina. See, it's so nice to see people. Thank you, Calm, Amina, Florence. Lovely to see you all. Mariana, great to see all the people. Encouraging cameras, yay! Hi, Anna Tazita. See, it's so much nicer to see people's smiles.
Hi, Jennifer. You're looking
Hi.
great, though. You have just flown from the US.
I just arrived and I look terrible. And I not only did I just arrive, but I have no water in my building from like the entire day. So I
Oh,
couldn't
so
even take a shower, which after an all-night flight is kind of a bummer. Yeah, or eat. Like I have one cup of tea. Thank God I had a little water in my water bottle. So anyway, nice to see everyone. I will stop talking about myself. I just to say, we are going to have time at the end of this call. We're going to hear from the women-led organizations that attended SVRI, and Anna Tazita is going to give us her poster presentation. But the reason I'm raising this now is because many of you on this call were at SVRI, and we're going to give you an opportunity to also share some of your experiences. So I'm raising this now so you can also be thinking during the call what you'd like to say or contribute about your SVRI experience at the end. And at the very, very end, we'll talk about the 16 days, which has not actually been put on the agenda. I will ask Shiva to put the agenda into the chat. The other thing is our agenda did change a little bit. And this is because there's going to be an update presented by UNHCR and their protection team from Lebanon on Thursday. And I'm going to ask Emily Page to put in the chat the information so everybody can tune in on Thursday to get the update for what's happening right now in Lebanon and the response, since it is a refugee-led response, which I believe we have said in all of our calls. So Emily Page, if you can put that into the chat. And that is why we're doing a last minute shift. And fortunately, Jessica is able to give us the update on East and Southern Africa region. So because there's going to be, including both coordinators from Lebanon, from UNHCR and UNFPA will be presenting on Thursday. We are, Emily said she'll put it in the chat in a moment, but Emily, can you just take your mic off and say what time it is on Thursday so people know?
Hi everyone. It's at I believe 10 a.m. Geneva time, but I'll double check and put it in the chat now. Thank you.
And the US
Yes.
just changed their time. You know how there's always that awkward week where we're in different time zones. So look at your Google Calendar always. But I think the US did change on Sunday. I was there for that.
Hi everyone.
And we're now back into the usual time frames that we are for most of the year, but it gets confusing. But yeah, Emily will put that in the chat. So we're not going to do the update on this call for Lebanon because it would be kind of a duplication of what's happening on Thursday. So with that news, will be handing over to Jessica, but just so that you're all aware, we also have both Trocaire and IMC on, who we're going to be talking about the MHPSS Phase 2 BHA supported project, which we're also very excited about. And then we'll be, like I said, talking about SVRI and also having a bit of an update on 16 days. And definitely feel free to be using the chat so that you can also be sharing what you're doing when we reach the part on the 16 days, just for us to know if you have plans. So with that, over to you, Jessica.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Gorham, and I'm the Regional Emergency GBV Advisor working on behalf of the GBV AoR here in East and Southern Africa. And I'm really pleased to be able to be here and talk a little bit about the work that we're doing here in East and Southern Africa. I'm going to focus a bit more on our regional level work because I think many of you have probably attended a lot of our webinars that we focus specifically on country level things. But if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask those as well. I'm going to turn my video off because I am on Wi-Fi here at the office and it just started to rain. So two things that could be a perfect storm, literally. I thought I would start out by just giving a bit of an overview of some of our sort of numbers and successes, or what we believe to be, from 2023, and maybe do a little bit of a comparison about how we're doing now in 2024 as well. So from the regional perspective, we have reached almost 7,000 individuals through our in-person and or remotely facilitated learning and advocacy events. 38% of those participants were from local organizations, and we're able to track those through our registration process, which we ask. And this year we've added a new element as well to better understand if we're reaching the donor community. And so when we hopefully have a similar presentation at the beginning of next year, we can also give a better understanding of whether our reach is in fact going to donors as well. And at the beginning of, in 2023, we had a 3-member team. So we spent 113 days in the field in crisis affected countries, providing life-saving technical support to member organizations. Now, this is in 2023. And so a little bit of the team dynamic has shifted in 2024. I see Christine Appio on the line. We miss her a lot, who used to be on our regional team here in East and Southern Africa. And of course, now she has a global role at UNFPA. So she was part of the statistics that are presented versus 2023, and she's very greatly missed here in Nairobi and beyond here in 2024. Next slide, please. So we also wanted to just discuss a little bit how we work and where we work. And many of you probably know this, but maybe just to put it into context with our region, we do really feel that we're a regional team with definitely level focus. So 46% of the work year in 2023 was spent in the field coordinating GBV responses at the onset of an emergency, building the capacity of local organizations to deliver life-saving interventions, and advocating for the rights of survivors across the region. So that was in 2023. We do feel we are on track to have similar engagement this year. Up to date, we have already, actually this is myself, since Christine, as I mentioned, is now at global level. So this year I have completed missions to Mozambique, Ethiopia. We've had 2 missions to Somalia. I've also been to South Sudan, Botswana on a preparedness mission, South Africa, and then we have Burundi coming up at the end of the month. And you can see that we really do try to reach our first-tier countries. And those are the countries that are in deep purple, and those are the ones that obviously have clusters activated. And it's an interesting dynamic here in East and Southern Africa because we also have 2nd-tier countries, and these are countries that are exposed to cyclical natural disasters and often take quite a bit of our time and energy from a preparedness perspective. And those that probably have maybe the most engagement from our perspective is Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Madagascar. And those countries, sometimes we tend to spend a bit of time on. If we don't, we see that they slip very quickly into even more sort of greater expansive emergencies. For instance, Malawi is a perfect example of that. Last year, or actually it might have been the year before, Christine Appio had to go to Malawi and actually coordinate at subnational level because of the floods. And it was about to transition into an even greater crisis unless we had done this from a preparedness perspective. So we've definitely got an eye on how we can build up or strengthen our preparedness work so that these transitional countries or those on the nexus are not slipping into greater emergencies where they don't have the infrastructure, certainly not the funding, and then also obviously exacerbating rates of GBV. Next slide, please. One of the interesting components, I think, of our region is that we do have a very active regional GBV working group for East and Southern Africa. I'm really proud of our working group, which has been in existence since 2018. We have approximately 35 member organizations. Of course, we have many more on our working group list, but in terms of active membership, I can say. And we do events. We have the working group, we meet monthly at the last Thursday of every month, but then we also have operational pillars, which are chaired by different organizations. And so we have 3 operational pillars, and those are intersectionality, which is chaired by Population Council. We have preparedness and risk mitigation, which is co-chaired by IRC, although it's kind of been taken over more substantially by the AoR. And then we have learning and advocacy, which is chaired by HIAS. And so each of those pillars is co-chaired by those other member organizations and then supported by the GBV AoR, obviously, as well. And we also, many of you might have attended one of our virtual events, because we do host those quite frequently. And this is where a lot of our numbers come from in terms of what our visibility and then also engagement. And you can also see that we also post regularly to the YouTube channel. So we also track that as well. And so just this gives an overview of some of the things that we've accomplished in 2023. And we're on track this year in 2024 to surpassing the numbers of people whom we've reached or engaged, and either surpassing or equaling the number of these virtual events. And also in terms of when we look at local organizations engaging those, our numbers are increasing, and I'm thankful to UNICEF because they have provided funding for us to be able to do simultaneous translation of all of our events the second half of this year into Portuguese, French, and Arabic. So that certainly expands our reach. Some of the things that people were super interested in this year in terms of wanting to have more information on, the top 2 sort of viewed events were the ones on prevention. And then we also had another event on the impact of the floods on women and girls here in East and Southern Africa. And that was our second most attended event this year. But of course, we're coming into the 16 days of activism. And so we have a whole stream of events that we'll be also hosting both virtually and then videos that we'll be producing as well. And so we'd like to really I would like to thank many of you who are on this call, many of our member organizations who enable us here as a team, the GBV AoR team here, to do these events. And so it's our member organizations are the ones who identify, for instance, in our videos, you know, who will actually be a part of those. And then this year, again, it's UNICEF who's going to be funding the editing and the other things. So we're really thankful to those member organizations who kind of do the legwork and then send it to us, and then we finalize. And I also want us to just share that all of our events, we make sure that certainly we have some of the technical presentations, but those are always followed by a local organization. So we like to prevent sort of the theory and then the practical as well. And I think this is why, again, some of our engagement has increased. Next slide, please. So two of the other things I just wanted to talk about just briefly, because I realize I don't have a ton of time, but one initiative here, and this is kind of a hallmark initiative for us, and one I've been working on for years, and that's our postgraduate diploma course at the University of Nairobi. And we're really proud that we are in our second cohort. So up to date, today, we have 38 students from countries in and around East and Southern Africa enrolled in the postgraduate diploma course at the University of Nairobi. Last year's cohort is just finishing, so they're in the midst of completing their research projects. And then we have the 2024 cohort who has just started in September, October. And on behalf of the GBV AoR, I do teach two of those two courses or two classes every term. So that's part of also my portfolio here in Nairobi. And so it also gives us a chance to really engage with students. We consider this a localization project because we specifically targeted a university here in East Africa so that it would be more accessible to students in terms of price. And I want to let everybody else know here as well, if you're thinking about trainings, to graduate with a postgraduate diploma from the University of Nairobi, which is a year-long course, it's approximately, with the exchange rate right now, about $2,000. So when you think of this initiative, and then also maybe compare that to some of the trainings that we often send our staff to, just think of that in terms of cost comparison and what they graduate with. The other reason that we really designed this class to be asynchronous, so that means, and then also it's all online. So the idea is if we have an emerging practitioner, say based in one of the rural states in South Sudan or in Somalia or in Ethiopia, who really wants to learn more about the technical sort of practice of GBV and emergencies, they really need to only have access to Wi-Fi at least once a week to be able to download the materials. Then they can complete all of the assignments and other things, and then would have to get to a point to upload those materials. We do have live discussions as well, so we do recommend that obviously they attend those as well. So we think of this as a great opportunity for those that need just that extra level or engagement or education to be able to then, you know, move on, right, in their careers. We're also really pleased that the Swiss SDC has sponsored many of our students with scholarships because it was difficult for us to be able to get particularly people from local organizations or local staff to be able to still have the funding, even at this, to afford to be able to do it. And so 18 of those students have been funded through scholarships. And SDC, we're very thankful to them for really prioritizing this and understanding that we do have to do some equity work there as well. And then we've also had some other organizations in Malawi and other places who have sponsored some of their staff. For instance, in Malawi, and I think this is one of those full circle GBV AoR moments, we had, as I mentioned, Christine Appio when she was on our team. She was deployed to Malawi for a month to work subnationally to strengthen coordination during the floods. She met some really amazing local actors there who really wanted to do this work well, but maybe didn't have the, you know, the background in coordination and actually GBV and emergencies. And so when our first cohort was coming together, it was Christine who contacted, you know, the Malawi office to say, we have someone at the ministry there working subnationally who's amazing, and she should be a part of this course. And so then we arranged for a scholarship to happen. So that woman who is working for the Ministry of Gender subnationally in Malawi is about to complete her year-long study here at the University of Nairobi and graduate now with a postgraduate diploma from the University of Nairobi. And so this is what we also call, right, when we think of how are we going to make this work, or our work sustainable in a way, right? And so I think this is a good way for us to do that, identifying those people who we know really want and believe in this work, and then seeing them through all of these channels, and then also making it feasible and accessible as well. And then that, I think, is a good segue. This is my last slide, is a good segue into a lot of the work that we're doing around climate change, preparedness, and anticipatory action, which is so key, because I know I could talk a lot about those cluster countries. And I think everybody's probably had at least a briefing or two around Somalia or South Sudan or DRC. But what we're not talking enough about, perhaps, is those countries who are experiencing cyclical natural disasters and don't have the infrastructure and able to respond. And so we're really trying, and from a preparedness perspective, and we also consider this a link to that nexus work from development to humanitarian, is looking at climate change. And we work closely with the Food Security and Nutrition Working Group here in East and Southern Africa to be able to do a lot of this stuff. And so some of the things that we're looking at now, we do have 3 countries in the region that have completed the GBV readiness assessment that was developed by the regional team. And so we're going to be putting that, our IMO, who is a dish, will be putting that together into a trends analysis report. And that readiness assessment really looks at the government, it looks at the coordination mechanism, and then also UNFPA or another lead agency. So it looks at 3 perspectives as to, are you actually ready to respond if an emergency happens? And so we've got a lot of great data from those 3 countries, and hopefully Eswatini will soon finish theirs. And we'd like to really kind of look at it from a trends analysis about what works and doesn't work. And then just another figure from 2023, we had over 589 individuals attend one of our climate themed learning or advocacy events in 2023. And we haven't done, perhaps, I guess we have, because so much of what even conflict now is related to climate change here in East and Southern Africa, that we could probably put together those numbers this year, but we're really looking at also creating more guidance so that our partner agencies have an understanding of what they can do to affect change in this region. And then finally, which I haven't, is not on any of these slides, I just wanted to lastly state that we are in the last stages as well. We just completed a pilot project in Somalia that really looked at, we were piloting the M&E framework for the 16 minimum standards. And so this is also another body of work that's really important to me, I think, and many of people in the region. So the idea was to pilot the M&E framework for the 16 minimum standards, but to use that framework to really assess the quality of services that we're delivering in emergencies. And so we chose Somalia as a pilot country. And I'm not going to speak too much about this because we do have an upcoming webinar that will be translated into multiple languages to really talk a lot more about this project and the importance of it. Because I think for the last, decade that we've been doing this, we've really put a lot of emphasis on the availability of services. And now I really think it's time for us to also look at the quality of those services being delivered. We need to go beyond in our reporting and also just our understanding. And so this was an opportunity for us to do that. The Americans had given us money for this to do this small project that we hope will now be, taken on in other countries in the region. It also provided an opportunity for us to look at whether, because the study was done around one-stop centers, since we needed to find, something standard in which we could measure all of these minimum standards. We've also got a lot of great information about whether, I don't want to say this because it might go beyond the scope of the study, but we in fact do have a lot of really good information about the efficacy of one-stop centers. And so I think that was something that came out of it. And we'll talk a lot more about that as well. But I was hesitant to put it in, but I see, Jennifer, you're on mic. So, but I did want to mention it because it was a big body of work that was just completed, and a good one, with a lot of good information that we're going to be able to parcel out to learn more about the 16 minimum standards as to whether they're being met at country level, particularly in a very complex emergency such as Somalia. We're looking at quality of services, and then also as a result of just the methodology that we use, we're also now gaining a lot of really good information about one-stop centers and whether they're being successfully utilized in some of these countries. I will stop there.
Yeah, we're a little over time, so what I'm going to ask is if people can just put their questions into the chat for you, Jessica, to respond to, or if you need to respond later. I know Jessica also has to leave soon, but I feel like
Thank you, everyone.
There's a lot of different issues raised that we could probably have a whole discussion the rest of the time just on this presentation. So I want to be respectful of our other presenters coming up. So if you can put your questions into the chat, I think Jessica will answer some of them before she leaves, or we can share them and get responses back. I do think, you know, one-stop centers is also something that we had the help desk do a piece on, and it's an area that I know Ethiopia is also looking into this, and other agencies. So we could do a whole session just looking at one-stop centers. I know that there is a lot of interest around discussing both women girl safe spaces and one-stop centers, and there's been some concern expressed that donors are now funding more one-stop centers rather than women girl safe spaces, and with limited resources, it's important for us to really have evidence about what we think is providing the best services for women and girls. So I think this is a critical issue for us to be looking at. So thank you, Jessica, for your presentation. And
thank you.
Please do put your questions in the chat. And I think it's good to hear from our different RIGAs what they're doing. And there's a lot that goes on in this region around the 16 days. And I understand this year that the topic is on adolescent girls.
Yes, I didn't mention that. Yeah,
but
yes, sorry, I could go on and on. I could have gone for an hour. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because I just wanted to clarify, we will have a whole webinar on that study, and we'll be able to really think about all those questions that you mentioned, Jen. And then for us, the 16 days, we're focusing on adolescents because we did have a lot of great information come out based on the floods and the drought, and some of the maybe how we could have targeted adolescents a bit stronger. And so we're going to be doing that during the 16 days of activism, raising awareness about the importance of really distinguishing adolescents from just adult survivors or people at risk and child survivors. So thank you, everyone. I'll stop here. Hi, Micah.
Okay, so next on the agenda, we have, as mentioned earlier, the MHPSS Phase 2. I know a number of our members were involved in Phase 1, which happened in Somalia and Myanmar. And I won't share the presentation since we have Micah from IMC, and we have Amina, Ahmed from Trocaire. And just to say, this Phase 1 was led by GWI with Alina Potts and Trocaire. And Phase 3 has added IMC. Sorry, Phase 2. I'm being optimistic, Micah. I'm thinking ahead. Phase 2 has added IMC to the mix, and this is a project that is also looking at both the GBV actors' response to MHPSS, as well as looking where are there points of consensus in terms of approaches with the MHPSS reference group actors. And just to say that the MHPSS reference group with Carmen, who's one of the two facilitators at the global level, and the GBV AoR were both also supporting this project. And it was thanks to funding, and thanks again with funding. I don't know if anyone's on this call from BHA, but we thank them for the funding for this. So I don't know what order you're going in, but I will hand it over to both Trocaire and IMC.
Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks, Amina, for sharing the screen. I'm going to start us off, and then Amina will talk about the more exciting piece, which is what we're doing now. But I'm just going to start with a bit of background beyond what you shared already. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm Micah with IMC, by the way. And Jennifer mentioned that IMC was not one of the partners in phase 1, though we participated as part of the advisory group for this project that we're going to do an overview of today. And yes, both phases, both phase 1 and phase 2 are supported by BHA. So we're very grateful for that. So I think we'll get started. The first slide. Thanks, Amina. So the first phase of the project, this is my piece, just an overview. The first phase ended last year. And the idea for this was to spend time with both GBV and MHPSS actors to see if we could develop guidance on areas of consensus between the sectors in supporting survivors of GBV. So it involved a lot of steps that we'll go through together in slides coming up. But the work overall was guided by an advisory group with 17 organizations, half of those being women-led organizations, and also a lot of desk research to see how much evidence and existing guidance already existed between our sectors that we could draw on. So next slide. So this is a snapshot of the process that was taken during phase 1. So in that, we led a series, and I'm saying we, sorry, even though IMC was only on this advisory group, but there was a series of surveys following more than 100 GBV and MHPSS practitioners, roughly divided in half, and then also some dedicated field consultations. And those took place in Myanmar, Somalia, and Nairobi, and then a final consultation held in Washington, DC with the advisory group. So during the surveys, GWU and Trocaire, they led what they called a Delphi process, if people are familiar. It was basically starting with a series of questions and then continuing along the same questions and trying to reach consensus through that process. So the beginning survey started with reaching out to those more than 100 people and started with 27 open-ended questions around 12 different themes that were identified as being potentially prickly issues or important issues, possibly areas of contention and practice between GBV and MHPSS practitioners. And so everyone responded to those, well, most people responded to those questions, and then later got to see the results of the questions from others to see if they wanted to change their questions and get closer to consensus or the opposite. And then in the end, through this, we were able to establish more and more consensus, and then also hone in on the areas that were particularly sticky, where we didn't have consensus and where there might still be different views and therefore more guidance or clarification required. So there's an example here on, I think the next slide are coming up. Sorry, first, these are the 12 themes that the questions dove into. And through the questions, everyone was asked on a Likert scale how much they agreed with a statement. Strongly agree, don't agree at all. And those centered around these 12 themes. And pretty quickly, some of those themes, we identified that there was actually quite a bit of consensus already. And then some of them stuck out as like I said before, really needing more thoughtful attention and perhaps more guidance. So in the next slide, you can see an example of a question. Yeah. So this is an example. You see how people receive the information. So as an example, in the theme of mediation, someone was asked in this scenario that they were facilitating a group session and someone disclosed that they were perpetrating GBV. In such a situation, would you use that group to dive into the topic of GBV and try to problem solve approaches with the group or not? So someone here in this example responded the first time around that they strongly agree that this is something they would do. In the second round, or maybe the third round, this question is coming back to them and they see actually the majority of people said that they disagreed or strongly disagreed with this approach. So it might make the person who originally responded that they agreed question that and maybe return to the guidance or think more about the question, and then they have a chance to revise their score or confirm their score. So through this process, some people did start to shift their opinions and move toward consensus, and then in some cases not. So moving on again. In the end, what resulted from this process of almost 2 years is some new guidance, which I hope we're all really excited about. IMC, Trocaire, GWU, we're all really excited about what emerged from this process. So in the next slide, we'll see the core guidance document is this guidance here, the snapshot, the supporting uptake of survivor-centered practice. It's an overview document that covers key resources. It puts forward GBV case management as central to all MHPSS care for GBV survivors, so that's a grounding approach, a first approach, and we thought that was quite important to have that consensus, as this is the central approach for service provision. The guidance also establishes some key terminology and hopefully clarifies across the two sectors some points of commonality and also some points of difference, and the resources available in multiple languages. In the next slide, we'll see that this guidance includes just a breakdown of key principles across GBV and MHPSS programming in hopefully a useful snapshot. And here already you can see some points of commonality, certainly, but also the idea of bringing all of this on board in MHPSS services for GBV survivors. So we have the GBV guiding principles that establish the survivor-centered approach. We also have the MHPSS core principles for services, the humanitarian principles that we're all familiar with. And then we also defined the feminist approaches that underpin GBV programming and certainly a lot of MHPSS programming as well. And then also trauma-informed care. And the next slide. So in addition to that guidance document, the general or overarching guidance document, through the process of phase 1, we also established 5 specific pieces of guidance or resources related to those stickier issues that emerged through this process. So first, we have 3 guidance notes on these 3 topics: couples and family interventions, use of transdiagnostic approaches, and exposure techniques. So for each of these, there's a guidance note summarizing the existing guidance and consensus between MHPSS and GBV practitioners, some sort of do's, don'ts, and there's also guidance on how to explore these themes further through maybe discussion groups with practitioners, or even that could be used in trainings. It's not a training module, but could be used that way. And then also there are 2 learning briefs. So these aren't establishing as much new guidance, but really pulling together in handy learning briefs the existing guidance around child and adolescent survivors and also managing risk of suicide. Because while this guidance existed, there was, through the process of consulting so many practitioners, there was still confusion about these approaches. So next slide. We have all of this available in multiple formats and places. So you can find the learning briefs, the guidance notes, and the overarching guidance all in GWI. I keep saying GWU. The Global Women's Institute is part of George Washington University. You can find all of it in their public box folder. You can also find it on their website. And there are accompanying videos for each of these five guidance notes learning briefs on GWI's YouTube channel. And they're also available through the GBV AoR website, but we can link here handily in the chat if that's useful. And sorry, they're available on the GBV AoR website as well as the MHPSS MSP website. So I think that is important because, as Jen noted, this is a joint initiative and really, really joint in that it involved equally MHPSS and GBV practitioners and participation of both, well, the reference group and the AoR. So I think there's a final slide for phase 1 before we get into the exciting information in phase 2. And then also there are some infographics to accompany those new pieces of guidance to hopefully even be more user-friendly. So we have the infographics, the user-friendly guidance notes, and also the videos to try to help build this into our culture of practice. And Amina will take this forward, but just to also reflect that one of the, I think, biggest outcomes of this process was just enthusiasm for the process itself, and a lot of reflection from both GBV and MHPSS practitioners about the importance of holding space for these kinds of dialogues, and the opportunity to share practice and to talk about difficult issues from a technical perspective and really grounded in principles, and how rarely, unfortunately, we find that space and time to do that. So there was a lot of enthusiasm for how we sort of carry forward that idea of working in collaboration toward consensus. And so hopefully that brings us into what we're doing now. So I'll hand over to Amina. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah, for that overview, and Jennifer for also introducing this project. So I will proceed now to talk about phase 2, which has just recently kicked off at the global level and soon to be rolled out in 2 countries, Ethiopia and Somalia. So as Micah explained, the process was a novel platform to bring together GBV and MHPSS actors to be able to reflect together on areas of convergence and agree on best approaches for supporting particularly GBV survivors. In terms of now the second phase and what it entails, we will be disseminating these resources at different levels with members of the national and subnational GBV AoR and MHPSS technical working group. And we hope to also integrate the guidance within relevant initiatives at different levels, both at global and national and subnational levels. Maybe perhaps to mention, in Ethiopia and Somalia, we are working in Tigray and Gero region respectively. And following on from that, we hope to, within this phase now, really delve into rolling out the guidance at field level with practitioners and continue this dialogue in terms of supporting now the uptake and usage of this consensus guidance, particularly through dialogue sessions, bringing together both practitioners from both areas of work. And beyond that, creating peer professional development spaces where organizations and peer level actors can be able to work together one-on-one within groups of service providers in their context, and to be able to really reflect on what improvements need to be there in practice, what challenges they're encountering, and how to be able to address that. We foresee also that through that process of dialogue that we would issues would emerge in terms of where the guidance is not going too much in depth, or where there are particular contextual issues that need to be clarified further. And this process also will enhance what the guidance is able to do in practice. So in essence, and then eventually we also will be monitoring what comes out of those two contexts in terms of learning, both not just for the project, but for broader sharing within both subsectors. In terms of what our work plan looks like, as I mentioned, it started recently at the global level, and this project will be running for 24 months. There was an advisory group that played a role. It entailed a number of GBV and MHPSS actors at the global level who are able to offer their technical inputs, look at the guidance, and this will continue in the phase 2. And for this phase 2, we will be expanding it a bit more to include also additional WLOs from the particular context where we will be rolling out and piloting the uptake and implementation of these guidelines. So that's Somalia and Ethiopia. And in terms of expected products, to be able to support the dialogue, we'll further developed scenario-based learning tools that are linking to the 5 resources that earlier Micah referred to. Then we also hope to put together a very practical practitioner-focused discussion guides that will be able to support those discussions, not only with the GBV-MHPSS actors, but even beyond, where that kind of engagement is needed just to ensure that there is a common understanding, and that eventually this is going to lead to improved practice in terms of safe and effective survivor-centered MHPSS services. Then we will also develop case studies from the 2 contexts, and I already mentioned the supplemental technical guidance. And in terms of continuous learning and sharing what is coming out of the project, GWI will be leading on putting together at least 3 webinars looking at the emerging issues and what we are learning. And of course, we will be continue engaging with both the GBV AoR and the MHPSS technical working group, working with them collaboratively on this. And then now the phase we're at, we're doing stakeholder mapping and looking at the 2 particular contexts. We're looking to understand how the WLOs in the particular context are, which ones work on minority rights, and ensure the aim is to ensure that we are able to cover at least the full demographic profile of service providers in those particular contexts, and that we are not leaving anyone behind. And from there on, one particular group that is of interest is particular organizations that are representing marginalized groups or underserved groups. This stakeholder mapping eventually will inform the advisory group membership. And so, yeah, we've come to the end of our presentation. Thank you, Jennifer. If there are questions now, maybe later.
Thank you. You stuck with your time a bit better. So if there are questions, people can feel free to either raise your electronic hand or turn on your video screen and raise your real hand, or write your question in the chat. There has been a lot of questions in the chat about access to materials, which Micah has been very rapidly responding. So if you haven't been looking at your chat, please do look and see that there's a lot of links that Micah has provided for gaining access to all the learning materials that have been presented, and also where to find information. And just to say, all of these calls are recorded and shared in the GBV AoR video chat, so you can also have access to the video presentations. And we do send out after these calls links to the PowerPoints. So any questions about the content? I see we have a hand raised. I know you wrote in the chat asking about Ethiopia. Do you want to just take off your mic and ask?
Okay.
I can't
you.
tell by how you're
Abraham, you can
is
say
Giddy your
Gigi.
first or last name? Sorry, I don't want to say the wrong
First,
name.
Abraham or Gigi. You can call me Gigi.
Okay. Over to
So,
you, Gigi.
yeah, thank you very much. I am Gorham Gide or Gigi from Ethiopia, Tigray. I'm doing my PhD on women's empowerment, so directly with gender issue. So it is my pleasure to hear from you. It is good presentation for our presentations. So my question is, one, would you tell us the success story from survivors? You know, in Tigray, as you all know, during the war, hundreds of thousands of women are raped and they are in their home. They cannot come to the one-stop centers to get the services. So they are in their home because of the culture that we have. So would you tell us exemplary or success stories from survivors, from victim to survivor, from survivor to ambassador? The other point that I want to ask you is, which model is important or good to heal our survivors? Nowadays, there is Panzer model. The other one is different model. So which model is helpful, especially in patriarchal societies, to heal survivors from the sexual or gender-based survivors? Thank you very much. Hello?
Yeah, Micah or Amina, do you want to respond?
Well, I can come in. From what I understood, the two questions, the first one was talking about access to services and how women are not able to go to those facilities. So I think for this project, it's mostly looking at the technical guidance, but we're working within the coordination spaces as well, both the GBV AoR and the MHPSS working group at those sub-national levels. So it is an issue that I think can be brought up. I cannot respond myself on what the strategies will be, but I think it's an issue that could be brought to those spaces for solution to be looked at. And then I think the other question was on whether the cultural, or if I got it right, which approach is better for healing. So from what I understood, the phase one of this project did not cover or look at indigenous approaches. And I think also that's a broader question that perhaps cannot be responded to within this call. Micah?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I guess just to say that we're implementing in Ethiopia, and this is again in Somalia and Ethiopia, we're implementing in Ethiopia in two different areas of Tigray. And that's, when I say we, that's 4 organizations. So it's IMC, Trocaire, and 2 women-led organizations. And all 4 of these organizations have been providing services to survivors in the region, both MHPSS and GBV services. So they're coming from a perspective of having service points, having practice around this, and definitely receiving large volumes of survivors, I think all 4 organizations. So they will be the project leads, and then they'll be bringing together, mirroring what we've done at the global level. So they're bringing together additional practitioners, both government, but also additional women-led organizations, international organizations, service providers. So while there's an element of coordination, we're really focusing on creating that dialogue space for service providers to come together and talk more about how it's going. And how best to serve survivors. So I think these nuances of how survivors are best receiving support in the cultural context is exactly what we want to get to, and whether the guidance that we have at the global level right now is working, if it needs to be further refined, and we'll develop additional guidance that's practitioner-led from those contexts. And then the advisory group at the global level will be involved in that process to see how much of what's emerging from those field contexts we think is actually globally applicable, perhaps with some adaptations. And so that's what we're really excited about, because it should be very, very field focused and field driven from this point, the guidance that emerges from phase 2 that we'll then take forward.
I'm just going to add, not related specifically to this project, but just to say the global protection cluster, including child protection and GBV AoRs, well, actually all 4 AoRs, did go on mission at the very beginning of September to Ethiopia. We were in Shire and in Tigray. And just to say, we were very aware and heard from a number of people that the services are not adequate for the needs, that the needs and demand for services have increased, that the peace treaty or the signing of the ceasefire, we're aware that there's still conflict going on, that rape is still happening. And we are actually having a donor briefing in Geneva on Friday where we will share some of these issues, because we realize Ethiopia has not been getting attention in the media and that the needs have not gone away, that the situation is horrific and continues to be horrific. And so a lot of advocacy is needed, funds are needed, and we know a number of partners have not had enough funding to continue their work. I think the GBV AoR at the national level has lost about half of their partners due to lack of funds, and that's really impacts the women-led organizations. So just for all of you who are on the call, please do, if you're working in Ethiopia, we hope, everything we can do for advocacy. We know that MHPSS is a very critical need that's not being sufficiently addressed due to lack of resources. I'm going to say, if you have more questions, please put them in the chat, because I don't want us to lose the time that we have for Tazita, who is the executive director of Women for Change in South Sudan, and who presented a poster also with together with Trocaire. There are a lot in our call today. And it was called Shifting Power Dynamics, Exploring the Impact of Women-Led Organizations' Leadership on the Humanitarian Response to Women and Girls in Emergencies. And then we hope that there will be time that we have other women-led organizations who attended SVRI if they want to say something. And then I know a number of you were there. So, and I hope April will be back on the call by then, who attended from OCHA and had some interesting analysis of her experience there. So let's see how far we get with our timing, but over to you, Tazita.
Good evening from Juba. Thank you all, Trocaire, for the good presentation. Thank you, Jennifer, so much for this opportunity. I think I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but I will talk offhand, basically on what happened. First of all, I would like to thank the GBV AoR through UNFPA for the support that has been rendered in this project from 2002 to date, until we presented the poster successful last year. I also would like to thank Trocaire and the CAFOD for the mentorship program and for the journey that we had. Because of their mentorship and their support, they made us to have a very good poster that attracted a lot of interest while in South Africa, that is in Cape Town, during the SVRI. Yes, the SVRI, I think most of us know what it is. That's the Sexual Violence Research Institute that always holds its forum. It changes from different countries to another. And this year, it has been in South Africa, that is in Cape Town, from the 21st to the 25th, with the different sessions from one session to another. It is basically on research, different researches on violence against women and girls. A lot of great learnings were really there, and particularly on the, of course, this year team, it's SVRI team is connect, share, and learn. The 1 week was full of connecting, which I was very happy also to connect with most of the GBV AoR coordinators who were around. And then also we were able to connect with the Jessica in there, and also we learned a lot. Yes, and then we also shared a lot. Now, when it came to our poster, our poster was presented on Thursday, the 24th of 24th of October 2024, from 1 to 2 p.m. That is Central African time. And it was so interesting that, of course, despite many people had also left, but we had more than at least 20 people who were able to come by to our poster to hear, because somebody is speaking?
No, just
Sorry.
keep going. It's background noise.
Okay,
Just keep going.
yeah. So many people got interested to really know what is it all about, shifting dynamics, because the topic alone was catchy and everybody wanted to know. And then only seeing that double LOs, also they want to understand what was the project about, what impact did it bring to the double LOs that participated, and what are the recommendations from the research, or from the research that we did, since ours was more of a participatory research that also was conducted, and the participation of the two double LOs. Of course, we well know the project was a pilot and pilot in South Sudan and Somalia, where ADA in Somalia was leading it, a partner to Trocaire, and then also in South Sudan was Women for Change. So all the information I basically presented about how the project started, the journey, how both the institution went all about, and then the intentional, of course, call from the GBV AoR to see that project has to be done by the double LOs or double ROs in the two contexts, and also the willingness of BHA to support that project. So many questions came around. Of course, many people wanted to understand who were the ones who supported this project, and I was able to mention about BHA being behind it through GBV AoR, and then also this is UNFPA, and also through Trocaire. To the double LOs, looking into the policy of BHA not really supporting double LOs directly, and then also being the one of the call for action from UNFPA through the localization agenda, especially the GBV AoR, to see that the percentage of the double LOs is well represented in the cluster. And then they were also looking at why in South Sudan and in Somalia. And then if you see that there were also some in Yemen, it's already, I think, happening. So they were asking why those countries. So basically, I was able to also say it's because of the humanitarian context. That is one thing, because those are countries that are mostly the UN cluster system is very strong, and then also the humanitarian context is so there. So they needed to test if in this highly risky or heavily humanitarian context country can succeed in this project or no. So I think that is a model that it has to be piloted and the people were able to understand. And then of course the challenges that were there, they were asking what were the basic challenges. Of course, we mentioned most of the challenges that were in the research package, and they were able to really understand most of them, and basically that is it. And then of course that they also recommend, I think one of the clear recommendation that came out, and I would also like to share from here, is that we need the GBV AoR and then perhaps also Trocaire need to really share this widely with the donors, because the model seem interesting and they could like many donors to come in and to see that this model is piloted in different countries that are both humanitarian and not humanitarian, because some comments were like, if humanitarian context saved, what happened? It doesn't mean the women-led organization will not take any leadership position again. So I think that is what there's like the GBV AoR, whoever is involved in this should really do a good advocacy, or we can organize a donor meeting to present about that model to them, and then they were really very interested in that and they wanted to hear more. And that, yes, so that is one big recommendation that came from that. And of course, much as we also had the scannable code for the information, but some people also were requesting if there were specific booklet, like the report, if they were imprinted out and we could share with them that day. That was going to be something that they really requested. It could help them a lot, because some of them were like, yes, this is fine, but sometimes they will forget. When you scan from your phone, you end up forgetting. But then if they carry a book, they are able to share with their senior members, or with even some of their partners, to see that they are able to share that book and read more about that. So that is something that also came out from there. And then of course the last recommendation was in the aspect of the partners that were involved. So they're like, if there are opportunities of having a clear event, especially maybe in this localization events, they need to see that that information is shared, whether being somebody to talk or not somebody to talk, but share information, because they feel the resources there, because some of them really went through the whole document in our presence as we are talking to others scan the information and going through there, like the information is rich, but I think we are not doing enough in terms of sharing it. Not everybody accesses the GBV AoR area of responsibility website to get the information. So they feel we need to share it further with other platforms. Yes, then I told them, yes, that is being done, but of course not at a very high, not at a very intensive level. So I think that is something that also happened. So yes, and then apart from that, of course, we also had meetings with the GBV AoR team, which were there, of course, meeting others, and then also meeting some organizations like the GBV AoR team. For we were able to meet Care International was very much interested to understand the model, because they are like, they also have the same LLOs have been taking position, they're supporting that. So they wanted to see how did the Women for Change and ADA maneuver through the challenges, and like a kind of sharing experience, really to really talk about the model. And the IOM also was interested we were able to share. Personally, I had some side events. Actually, most of my days were full of side events to talk about the project and the models. So I think that was something which is very good. And I felt, yes, we did very good. And then, of course, one recommendation that later on I shared, I think I shared with the Stephanie, is that and next time when we want to present an information like that, let us put it always on the first or second day. Let's try to squeeze the organizers, because mostly, like by Thursday, we always call them the big boys and girls have left, because by Wednesday there was a dinner and many people left. So Thursday there were very few. There were many people, but I felt most of the decision-making personnel were not there, though they left their representative behind and few remained. So I just recommend that for whatever event that we are organizing, or the GBV AoR or the Trocaire or any partner is organizing, which is very interesting and have impact like what our project is about, should be done in the first, second day or third day, so that we really hold a lot of many key stakeholders into that. I think that is briefly what I will share, but if there are follow-up questions, you are welcome. Once again, thank you so much. And for everybody who is also here, who has decided to also listen to our journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just have put a few things in the chat. I spelled out what SVRI stands for and a little bit about what this event is. But for those of you who are not familiar with it, it is at least 1,500 people. And it's a lot of different events happening simultaneously, as well as all of the networking. It's a bit overwhelming, to be honest. It's so much to do. If you suffer from trying to do and see everything, it's a challenging conference, because there's so much that you want to see and learn, and you want to like duplicate yourself and have many of your own person, so you can have the side conversations that Anna was talking about, but still go hear panels and learn. And there's even luncheons. And I heard from April that this year it actually started as early as 7 and ended as late as 9:30 at night for 5 days in a row. So it's quite incredible. But yay for presenting. It's so exciting. We did have some other women-led organizations that the AoR supported to attend. Unfortunately, one got her visa so late she wasn't able to go. We had someone from Mali who I think is in the field, so I'm not sure if she was able to be on this call. Were there any other women-led organizations, or can be also from CARE, who would just like to share first a little bit about your own SVRI experience? I'm not sure who's online, but if I know that we have a lot of women-led organizations on this call, so I'm not sure if any of them were at SVRI that you'd like to speak before we start asking our INGO and UN colleagues to share. Anybody else?
Yes, thank you, Jessica. I'm here.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Laditra from Nigeria, particularly the Bay Network, the Bay State. I was at the SVRI. Thank you, everyone, and for the organizers of this wonderful program. It has been amazing. I listened to our colleague from Sudan, South Sudan. She have done amazingly during her presentation. For me, it was a learning process. It was a learning time because the attendance was very huge. The organizations and the planning was very, very amazing and wholesome. For me, that was my first time of attending the SVRI, which I learned a lot. The organizations of the sessions, just as you have rightly said, that it's like you want to duplicate yourself in almost every session, which was not possible. But we learned a lot of lessons learned, and we came home with a big goal to re-strategize in our intervention and prevention methodologies, because the issues of GBV, it has been underreported. And I'm coming from a community where the Boko Haram conflict has really bedeviled, and the cultural beliefs in this community does not allow women to speak out. And because of that, there are lots of challenges, there are lots of gaps, because as you're trying to solve one problem, you see people will come from one end or another to shut down the victims, to make their voice not to be heard. But by attending the SVRI, I was able to learn a lot of strategies on how to prevent and to respond to GBV issues, particularly rape, when it comes to rape of children. The sessions on violence against children, violence against women, have been so wholesome to me that how I wish this would be continue to happen from time to time, so that we that really from the vulnerable states, we really gain a lot of insights, and it will enhance our capacity in the provision of our interventions to victims of these conflict and challenges that we are facing in our various locations. One of the takeaway I learned was that despite the fact that the sessions were different sessions taking place at different times, the organizations were swapped. At times we move to one session and we discover before we arrive, the session is fully packed, and we have to make another choice to attend another one. Because once you did not register on time, you discover that you will not be allowed to attend to that session. But all the sessions that we have attended, it was a learning session for us, for me in particular. And I came home, I believe that the SAG members at my location, which is Borno State and the Northeast State, there's going to be a lot of support, let me use this word, so that the SAG members will be able to do better than what we are doing, despite the fact that our colleagues and FPA, they are doing the best we can to bridge the gap in any area that we find it difficult to do. So thank you for the organizers. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone. And how I wish Oxford has done wonderfully in connecting us and then in organizing the area of responsibility. He has wonderfully done well, because he looked after us, he checked on us, he followed us up to see whether we are in touch or we are really getting what we are there for. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and we look forward to working on. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, lady. And we did try to connect the women-led organizations that we knew were there. I strongly encourage all of the organizations present here of INGOs or UN that if you can sponsor some women-led organizations to attend SVRI. Actually, no one from our global office went this year, but we had both Jessica and Oswald there from the region. And Oswald is online, and he was the one that was supporting the women-led organizations, although it was his first experience also of SVRI. And, you know, I think we've talked in the past, you definitely need to go with a strategy of how to manage such a large conference. I have not yet figured out the best way to manage. I know people who've gone and actually don't go to any of the panels and spend all their time networking and holding meetings with people. So there's all different ways of going to SVRI. And I think we've discussed among our members in the past that for new people, it's great if you can have like a buddy system, someone who's been there before who can help you figure out, like what lady was just saying, like that you need to register for some sessions ahead of time or you won't be able to get in, and just to figure out how to get around from one space to the next. I understand they've also increased the well-being offers in terms of yoga and Pilates and different things, but then I heard that people didn't have any time to take advantage of those. But Oswald, do you want to say anything from your experience?
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, colleagues.
Oswald is our Riga from West Africa. Jessica is the one from East Africa, and Oswald is from West Africa. So we had somebody from both East and Southern Africa and West Africa running the GBV AoR table and supporting the women-led organizations. Back to you, Oswald.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think it was a very interesting and amazing opportunity to attend the SVRI forum. As Tazita and Lady already said, and I've seen some names of people who also attended, like Virginia and others who attended, who were there. I think the SVRI, it is a huge opportunity, and I would recommend all of you to attend. Jennifer just said that was around, not around, but almost 2,500 attendees for around 495 presentations. Can you imagine how it was very huge? What was very important to me, I saw that the approach was, I can call it a participant-centered approach. So the representation of all the regions, among stakeholders, also panelists, practitioners, researchers. We had also some donors, and the youth was there. So we always prepare the relief. The approach was also very interesting to allow everyone to navigate and to enjoy the 5 days of the forum. The channels was various to exchange for sharing experience. We have plenary sessions in the morning. After that, we had parallel sessions and also some workshops. We have also booths in the GBV AoR, a booth. Jessica was leading a GBV AoR booth for the region, but also for the global GBV AoR. And the gallery of posters. The gallery of posters were also very huge, and Tazita presented the situation, the leadership of women and women-led organization in GBV coordination in Sudan in one day during the gallery posters. The theme was also diversified, not only humanitarian, but also development, nexus, security, conflict, policies, response strategies, some studies, fundings of some studies in progress or already completed. So we have many choices, and sometimes it was a bit difficult to choose where to go, where to go. That's why I was there also to help my colleagues, women-led organization participants to prioritize and to not and to stay healthy in that forum. For my own interests, I've chosen the session related to intimate partners violence, positive masculinity, men's engagement through gender transformative approaches. That was very important for me regarding the region where I work here in Western Central Africa region with a strong patriarchy situation in the region. But I've seen that the fundings of the researchers which have been presented doesn't make the difference between the IPV during a humanitarian situation and the IPV during a star war or protracted crisis. I think this is something should be improved. Maybe because the researchers, the presentators didn't talk each other before, and I attended separately each session. But I saw that it should be great to improve that way. Regarding the posters gallery was very rich, very informative, very thing to learn. But I've seen that the time to visit the posters gallery was also the same time for the break time. So people didn't come didn't have time to enjoy and to explore all the richest of the posters which was there. And people go there because they know maybe the presentators, and it can be a friendly space for some people. Another thing I can say about the SVRI forum, it is the link between humanitarian practitioners, GBV humanitarian services specialists, and also the researchers. We need to work together in such area. This is still a bit weak in all our guidelines. We should find a way to use all the findings and to work with the others, researchers, like universities and individual researchers, youth researchers, to see how we can improve our programmatic and strategies in humanitarian. That's what I can say about the SVRI forum, but it was a very
Oswald. I appreciate it. I want to just, I see April has arrived too, but I just would like to give Care Everjoy, I know you were there, but Care also supported a delegation of women-led organizations. So does somebody from Care want to say something? Let's keep it very brief because it's actually now 4. If people need to leave, I understand that you have other calls, so feel free to do so. We're going to just have a couple more minutes on SVRI, and then very quickly, Shiva's going to present what the AoR is doing for the 16 days. So over to, would it be Everjoy, you, or somebody else from Care that wants to present?
Okay, I think I was there.
Yeah,
Maybe
go
I
for
can
it.
quickly comment. So Care was able to support a delegation through our both development and humanitarian programming, our humanitarian with Women's Voice and Leadership program, and then our development What Works program. And they, like sessions that they actually held, which was quite an eye-opener, especially for women rights organizations. And it was an opportunity for them to understand what is happening at global level. Yes, the other thing, apart from that, there were also posters that were presented, and I would want to thank those women rights organizations as well as organizations that presented posters. It was quite informative to actually see a lot of work that is happening. I think the gap that has been picked out between the academic and the practitioner might be to strengthen the work between the academics and practitioner. And it covered all topics, including climate change, which is very good for Southern Africa and other countries that have been affected by climate change. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I know we did GBV risk mitigation early warning sign in Isaro, Jessica, who can actually be able to highlight some of the studies, but that information needs to be shared widely. Thank you very much. It was quite an interesting community.
I like that word, communion. Communion of community. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a very energizing event, I think. Sometimes many of us feel very isolated in our GBV work, and I think SVRI is a great place to meet people you've worked with all around the world and get a bit of a battery recharge, as well as learning a lot. April, I'm going to hand over to you just for a couple of minutes. April, who is our core member from OCHA, was representing one of the UN agencies and had an interesting analysis. So I'm going to hand quickly over to her, but I think the idea is that we can have a more structured conversation in the future on SVRI, and I will let April go ahead and provide her thought. We have had a conversation, so I already know what she's going to say, but I think it's good for everybody to also think about these reflections. Go over to you, April.
Thanks, Jennifer. And just to concur with, our women-led organizations and CARE and other colleagues who've spoken on SVRI, just to reinforce that I think it's such an important space for us to be involved with, because it is that global space that's looking at, GBV from the whole response to prevention. And I think for us, how do we adapt some of these research practices and learnings into the humanitarian space? I think with each SVRI forum, there has been a growing momentum of more focus on emergencies. And so I think, leading up to the 2026 forum, I think we should have a much more consolidated, coordinated effort, as the GBV in emergencies, community, to make that a much more focused theme, because I think even though there was a lot of focus on conflict and displacement, it still felt a bit fragmented, right? Because I think we were all engaged in different bits and pieces of SVRI. So I do think, having a much more dedicated, structured conversation on what do we want as a GBV and emergencies community want to get out of SVRI, what are some of the things that we're promoting, what are some of the research things, would be really great. And I think also to consolidate our presence, because honestly, I didn't think it was the most strategic, because the UN was very well, and I think maybe a little bit overrepresented. We were almost 10% of the 1,500 that were there. So I think we need to kind of consolidate. Do we really need to have, 40 or 50 people from one UN agency represented? How best to do that work. But I think that's maybe something for us as a UN to kind of have a discussion on. And I think, for the GBV in emergencies community, I think we also need to come together and have this discussion. So at least we have a 2-year head start to kind of look at, what are we going into 2026 with, in terms of the themes, in terms of representation, in terms of the sharing of power and space as well, because I think it is a very feminist space, and I think we need to also question, how we interact in those spaces so that it is very shared and equal with civil society, with other practitioners, and across that whole spectrum from response to mitigation and prevention. So I just wanted to say I really value that space, and I think now more than ever we need to really look at, what does this mean in terms of the research and all the evidence that we know on what works in preventing GBV, and how is it applied to, to all of these humanitarian settings that we see, because more and more we're seeing GBV as, as a trend. Of course, it's always been there, but even more so now. And we have increase in reporting, which also means that there's more awareness. So how are we capitalizing on the fact that whilst we don't have the resources and the funding, but we do have more awareness and understanding that this is one of the major violations that happen in humanitarian settings. Thanks.
Thank you, April. So we're going to end there on SVRI. Like I said, the idea is that we can look to have a more structured conversation. I think that the organizers of SVRI would be very happy to have inputs from us on ideas, because since some of you are new, this did start off as a purely development space. And so the humanitarians, you know, it went from like 30 people to one panel or two panels, and it's really expanded, but perhaps not the most sort of strategic approach. Just very quickly, and I know we've lost half of our callers, so we're down to 20 from 40. But Shiva, if you can just very quickly say the focus of the 16 days from our side this year.
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. So we know the global team, it has been announced, and we also saw that our regional teams, they're having different focus in different regions based on the needs and the trends that they see in the region. So we didn't want to add on this cluster of teams that are being introduced. We're trying to have an umbrella theme that can connect all these links from different organizations and different teams that we have, so that we can support them and at the same time like have something from the global level. So we have decided on the theme tracing the roots of 16 days of activism and how it has started in different contexts and for different organizations, how they started to campaign around these days, and how they have used this campaigning for advocating for quality services for GBV survivors and women and girls in general. And we are reaching out to the members of GBV AoR in different contexts. We have sent the info to our coordinators. We're reaching out to the members to ask them this question, specifically women-led organizations, how they have used these 16 days and the campaigning around it to advocate for services for women and girls. And we will have some newsletter and key messages that we will share through our social media. And we are also supporting the regional teams, as for example, Jessica just mentioned about East and Southern Africa, and also UNFPA Humanitarian Response Division for the webinars, infographics, and different things that they're planning for these 16 days. So once we have all these finalized, we will have a table of the activities of different things that will happen, and we will share it with you in the coming days. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry for having gone over the 9 minutes. Thank you for joining the call, and you will get all the information that we mentioned shared to you, as well as the availability in the YouTube. And feel free, if you have more questions about the 16 days, Shiva's our focal point. Shiva, you want to put your email quickly into the chat? Feel free to get directly in touch with her. And a big thank you to Valentina, our intern, who's also working closely with Shiva on the comms side. And don't forget, Thursday is a presentation on Lebanon, led by UNHCR, that includes general protection, as it's with the protection team, also includes child protection and GBV updates from the coordinators. Thank you, everyone, and looking forward to all of your 16 days events, which we do like to showcase. So let us know what you're doing. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.